Olá, contatados, mais um episódio especial em inglês, legendas aqui no menu e vamos à entrevista. Hi, I'm Eduardo Oliveira and welcome to another special episode of O Contato in English with an international interview. Soon I'll be joined by my co-host Gustavo Cornaccioni and we will talk to Tom Vernon, British UAP investigator. He was a member of the UAP Files podcast and he has a channel on YouTube, Tom Vernon UAP. We will talk about his experiences, some of the work he's been involved with, and some other things. That's enough of just me. Let's get to the interview. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so and leave a like. Please leave the like now, because if you leave it for after the interview, probably you won't actually think we deserve your like. But anyway, Gustavo Cornaccioni is here with me, and he will talk to you about our guest. Gustavo, please.
That's a good way to sell your show. Leave your like now, or after you won't. So here we are back again, like the Backstreet Boys always said in the song. And like Eduardo said, we have an international interview. Otherwise, it would be just two Brazilian guys recording in English. We have a very special friend. Is the fourth member, basically, of O Contato podcast. Our international correspondent, our friend, our brother from the Tom Vernon UAP channel, Mr. Tom Vernon.
That's got to be the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. Thank you, guys. It's so good to be back. I always love talking to you guys, and when we've done it before, you've given me so much information, so I thought I'd repay the favor and bore you to sleep.
I've been working a lot, so maybe it's good.
I guarantee it. No, it's great to be back. I think you guys do such a fantastic job, and it's nice to see that people that watch my channel are always saying, when am I going to get you guys on again, and how are you doing? So yeah, the more we can work together, the better.
Yeah, it was very nice to have you. So the first time we did it with Jeff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we needed to bring just you here. It's your stand-up show. We are the audience. We are the audience now. I will just sit back and relax and listen.
Absolutely, yeah. If I hear snoring, I'll just send you a WhatsApp and nudge you back away. So I don't know how you want to kick off into this, but basically, I was just asked, Tom, I want you to talk about the TR3B. So I wasn't given any guidance or any instruction or any warning of how long to talk for. So I thought I'd prepare a really long presentation and go off track loads and loads of times.
Welcome
so you definitely
to O Contato. That's how it works.
Brilliant. So yeah, whenever you're ready, I'll fire it up.
Yeah, when I invited Tom to this talk, I said, he asked me, well, what do you want me to talk about? And what I said to him is, I want to interview you about the subject that's on your mind right now. What is keeping your interest at the moment? Okay, so that was my only direction that I gave to him. So he said, "Oh, all right." I already knew that he was studying this TR3B thing, and I said, "Oh, could we talk about TR3B?" And he said, "All right, so let's do it."
Awesome. Yeah. So I've been working on these mysterious black triangles, and I've been able to test my theories, because I'm no scientist, with some people that are, and amazingly they've all said that it sounds like it's probably true. So rather than present it on my channel, that was exactly when you guys asked. So I thought, well, hey, you guys can have the scoop, and then if it's wrong, it doesn't matter.
Sure, yeah. Hey, I have something here that I was preparing for my channel, but I'm not sure how good it is. So I'm going to leave it to yours.
This is called a test drive.
Exactly. No, but seriously, I mean, I'm going to start nice and sensible, and then we get weirder and weirder and weirder as it goes on. And by the time we get to the end, I promise you it's going to get very interesting. So yeah, ready when you are.
Eduardo, do you have something to say before Tom starts his show?
Yes, just to get it started, actually. Tom, could you tell us very briefly how you got interested in these weird subjects and UAPs and so on, and specifically how you got into TR3B?
Yes, that's a great question. So I have always been interested in military aviation from when I was little. And then I had a sighting in 2020 of a UAP, followed 3 weeks later by another one. And then things have escalated. And now my entire life's changed. And I find myself on the internet talking about flying saucers and meeting amazing people around the world. So I've got no idea what's going on or what led me here. But I'm very, very grateful for it. And I'm having the time of my life. So when it comes to the black triangles or the TR3B, which we'll get into, I find it fascinating because I actually think they're ours. And that's going to come out during the presentation. At least most of them, I think, are ours. And I find that just as interesting as if they're from Zeta Reticuli. But I think I've got good evidence to show you why I think that, and I also want to talk about the dangers of just throwing everything in the same basket. When we are studying the unknown, everything goes in together. So, for example, people say, "Oh, it's a flying saucer. It's a flying saucer," and it could be 1,000 different things. It's the same with these black triangles, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But basically, I find it fascinating. There's a real science behind it as well, and so I'm happy to talk about it. That's okay.
Okay, so how do we begin here? What is the first thing we need to know about it?
I've got a presentation that I made on PowerPoint, which is on my second screen. And I've never shared a screen on StreamYard before. So to kick things off, the TR3B doesn't exist, and that's the end.
But, so this is it, my friends. This is the episode. Thank you very much.
So thanks for coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah, whilst it's still hot. But seriously, I am going to mythbust the TR3B first of all, and then get weird when everybody's in a false sense of security. So the TR3B is an egregore, and an egregore is a non-physical entity or a thought form which arises from a collective thoughts and emotions of a distinct group of individuals. What I mean by that is the more people believe in a thing, the more it becomes known, the more it becomes real. So we're at a point where anything that you see or hear about, which is a triangle or something with lights on the points, people immediately say, well, that's a TR3B, without anybody actually knowing that there ever was a TR3B. It just automatically falls in. This is shown if you Google image. If you Google image search a TR1, you see the TR1, which was the U-2 spy plane. If you Google image search the TR2, then you see the TR2, which was another model of the U-2 spy plane. If you Google image search TR3, it immediately goes TR3B, and you see, as you can see here, 50 different shapes, all loosely having lights on. And that's the only thing that they've got in common. And yet, people know this thing as the TR3B. without knowing what a TR3A is or a TR3C, or most people think TR means triangle, and it isn't. It's tactical reconnaissance in the Air Force or the intelligence agencies. So that being said, the danger that comes with that is with misidentification. Imagine if you had been on a desert island all your life and you'd never seen a helicopter, and then one day you do. You would go back to your village and describe it as much as you could and say, like, yeah, so there's this thing, and it had like swords on the back, and it had 4 swords on top of it, and it was hovering, and it was noisy. So then anytime anybody from your village sees something that fits that description, they're going to say, oh, it's a H13B, like Tom said. But as you can see on this slide here, some of these will kill you, some of them will operate on you, some of them will arrest you, and others are just operated by rich people that don't care who you are. So it's very dangerous to just generalize and throw everything under the same bucket just because it looks similar. And therefore, the TR3B does not exist because there's no proof. So, that being said, something is seen. And the Ministry of Defense in England, in particular, the United Kingdom, has had lots and lots and lots of sightings of strange triangles through the years, mainly through the 90s. And this got the attention of the Ministry of Defense. And in the year 2000, they published a report about this called the Contato report. And in this report, it's enormous. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages to it, and they study everything from fairy tales and folklore to plasma creatures and orbs and ball lightning. But they also talk about black projects, because the UK has lots and lots of American air bases in up and down, and they, in fact, the US Air Force use lots of RAF bases for their own craft. And we've had a lot of secret stuff operating from the UK. So, for example, we at Bentwaters, which is just where the Rendlesham Forest sighting was, they were flying the U-2 spy plane out of there, and they didn't tell the British government that they were doing that. In fact, they smuggled it in banana crates and built it there so that there would be no evidence. So there is a history of black projects being flown in and out of the UK, and some of those are mentioned in the Contato report. So, for example, as you can see here, they've got the F-22 Raptor, and this is in the year 2000, so this is before it was public knowledge for us. They've got the F-117 Nighthawk, they've got the Blackbird, saying that may have been across, but there are still several airframes which are fully blacked out and classified, meaning that there were things in the sky that even the British are classified to this day. So, bearing that in mind, when we go to the next one, they also saw some terrifying entities, which also show up in the Contato report. I just thought I'd mention those as well in case they seem familiar. But there is a history of black projects, which were black triangles, which were seen. For example, the Lockheed Martin D-21, which was this amazing drone, which was deployed by the Blackbird, and it started development in 1962. And this thing could do 2,200 miles an hour. So, as if they would do that and just go, well, that'll do, and never continue to develop it. Other black triangles that have been in development. This was the Northrop low altitude penetrator concept. And apparently there was a working prototype. This is at the same time as the Have Blue concept, which would appear later as the F-117 Nighthawk. But this was for a hypersonic, or very, very, very high speed at least, quite low altitude black triangle. This sighting was by a man called Chris Gibson, and Chris Gibson was this is why it's important, is he was a member of the Royal Observer Corps, and these were people that were specifically trained to identify NATO planes and non-NATO planes as a sort of civilian intelligence network. And he was working on an oil rig, and he saw the particular stratotanker which used to refuel the SR-71 Blackbird, because it had to go super, super high. It had two F-111s as an escort, but it was refueling like an almost perfect black triangle that he saw, and it was at very, very high altitude. Now, he was such a keen observer that he could tell the difference between a normal stratotanker and the specific one. I think it was the Q variant that refueled the Blackbird. So that's definitely not extraterrestrial. It's clearly a prototype or a black project. Potentially, it was that Northrop. And then you've also heard, in association with the TR3B, the term Aurora. Now, Aurora was initially the code word given to the B-2, or the Impossible Diamond, all the sort of vat-shaped planes that ended up being the B-2 and the B-21 bomber. Particularly interesting, though, and particularly true, was this drawing on the right, which was done by Mark McCandlish, which is, I've done documentaries on. It's a very, very, very interesting man. And this, so it came about, Aurora had been mentioned in a 1985 US budget request asking for $2.3 billion for black aircraft production. So that kind of gave away the code name. And that's not the first time that that's happened. Jimmy Carter gave away Project Grill Flame, which later became SRI and all of those guys. I don't want to go too far into those weeds. But basically, the Aurora, as described by Mark McCandlish, who was an aircraft illustrator for Jane's Defense Weekly, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Rockwell, he said that it was a pumpkin seed shaped craft with 4 inlets, 4 engines, and it was covered in thermal tiles, a lot like the space shuttle. And it was designed to be an extremely high altitude, hypersonic, unmanned aerial vehicle. So you can imagine, from the D-21 back in the 60s to this in the 80s, this being a natural progression of extreme speed, high altitude technology. But there's always a problem, which is you can only go so fast before things get so hot and need so much fuel that they burn up, and you can't take any payload or anything like that. Every extra mile an hour of speed costs more. That being said, there is something there. Triangle sightings, as I said before, particularly in the UK, have been seen probably more than any other type of UAP. And it was very, very, very strongly concentrated throughout the 90s and mid-80s. These are some of the most famous and, frankly, to me, most credible sightings. So Colin Saunders in the UK in 1999 had a very interesting encounter with one, had a very close look at one. I've got some pictures of his sighting to come. At RAF Cosford, which was a military Air Force base about an hour away from where I live, in 1993, they said that they described it as a Star Destroyer. They said this gigantic black triangle came in, hovered silently over the runway for a while, and everybody was freaking out, and then it shot off. Now, this has been debunked by saying that there were some rocket boosters falling back into the atmosphere at the same time and in that same direction. Now, I believe that may well be the case, but there are eyewitness accounts, and they're saying a massive black triangle hovered silently. So I don't think the two match. Mark Leeper is a man from the UK who I've spoken to. He was out in his back garden and he had 2 black triangles with, I think he said 5 lights on the back, silently just above the trees in his back garden. He had, and it's not like a gigantic tree, it was like an oak tree. So these things are probably 40, 50 feet off the ground, silently hovering over a residential area. Well, he said they were cruising at about 10 miles an hour and they just very, very slowly went out of sight. This is in keeping with a load of sightings in the Midlands of the UK, so around Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Cheshire, that became known as the Dudley Dorito. Dudley is a place in the Midlands, because over large population centres and sort of cities and stuff, people just kept seeing these craft. And they were often described as, sometimes people would say they had coloured lights glowing on them. Other times they would just say it was jet black. Or they would say they just blacked out the sky. And if they were seen at night, and a lot of them were, people would say that they'd be stood outside looking up, and the only reason they could tell it was there was because all the stars would go dark. And that's an important point to come back to for later. In fact, the Phoenix Lights is exactly that. So the Phoenix Lights is very, very interesting. And although people describe this kind of wide delta of bright lights, other people described a jet black triangle, like that it was filled in, that the lights were around the outside, but the actual inside of it was solid. And so there was also an incident where the RAF was scrambled about a sighting in Sheffield in England in 1997. Again, this is sort of North Midlands. And during this, apparently a Panavia tornado crashed. This has all been officially debunked until somebody went to the crash site and found a piece of the engine, and it's got titanium in, which immediately shows that it wasn't a World War II crash or anything like that. And then we get to who I personally think is the most credible witness, and that's Dan Isbell. And Dan is a friend of mine. He is a former colonel in the US Air Force, and he's seen 2 of these. He had one sighting on December 26th of 1980, which is the same date as the Rendlesham Forest incident. And on that, he was working for the US Air Force at that base. He wasn't on the base at the time. He was out driving down the country roads. And I've got an image that the FBI forensic artists made for him based on his observations. Now, he went on to be, just to tell you how credible he is, he ran the F-22 Raptor development program. He was a U-2 pilot. He was a dual qualified flight instructor for the US Air Force. And his job was to, let's say they stole a MiG or something like that, to look at it, figure out how it flew and its dimensions without even getting in it, so that when you do get in and you can wing it, you already know how that plane develops. So his description of one of these craft, frankly, carries more weight than anybody else's. Interestingly, almost 10 years later, he then saw a huge black triangle. But this time he saw it at Edwards Air Force Base in America. And that ties in a lot with something that we're going to get onto shortly. Then we've got Dylan Borland, and he is the most recent congressional witness, which testified in November of last year with Jeff. And he said, that in 2012 at Langley Air Force Base, he was on a cigarette break, went outside, and out of a NASA hangar, there's also a hypersonic test facility at Langley Air Force Base, by the way. But out of a NASA hangar came this bright white light, and he then said it resolved into an immense black triangle, but he described it like a lava lamp, like a boiling plasma. all over it in golds and different colors, but mainly gold. And then it shot up out of sight. There was a big flash from the central white light underneath it, as we often hear about in these TR3B or triangle cases. And then it went so high that he could just see it the same size as the other stars, and then it moved out over the ocean. So clearly, over this amount of time and this amount of credible witnesses, there is something being observed, and it's not all the same craft. So this is an outlier. This is a very, very famous photograph from Calvine in Scotland, taken by two hikers in 1990. Now, I'm only including this because we don't know what these things are. So given that this is a very famous photograph of a roughly triangular craft, I wanted to include it just for the sake of data. Now, I have actually got a theory about what this is, but maybe we'll get onto that another time. I think it had a lot to do with the Gulf War and laser designation. But yeah, either way, it's one of the clearest photographs of a triangular craft, and that's a Harrier underneath it to give you some idea of the scale. Here's a photograph from the Phoenix Lights in Arizona. You'll notice that you can't see anything in between the lights, and they also moved a little bit, but as I said, other people were describing a giant black triangle, and it started off as a curve of lights, but nobody could see anything in between them, and that's the key point as we get weirder moving on. This is an artist's description of the Colin Saunders sighting from 1999, and he said he described it as like in Terminator 2, if you've seen that. He said there was a silver ripple moving all along the craft, and these metallic, almost like a hieroglyphic, he described it, but what he meant is this pattern here, this sort of maze pattern of silver. So then that is important because this ties in with what Dylan Borland saw, and Dylan Borland saw it in 2012, and this is 1999. Dylan was in America, but the theme is American air bases. This was done by the FBI's forensic artists for Dan when he reported his sightings to Americans for Safe Airspace, which is Ryan Graves' company in America. And he described it as a rounded front, very sharp angled back corners, but this kind of multicolored energy dancing all around the outside of it with these smaller lights. He said they look a bit like the LED lights that you get in ceilings, you know, in kitchens and stuff like that, but bathed in this multicolored sort of swimming psychedelic colors. And it was over a golf course, and he was about 100 yards away. So like I said, there is no better person to describe something in the sky than him. This is a drawing that Dylan Borland did of the craft that he saw, with the perspective that he would have been kind of about here. Yellow transparent lava or plasma moving around the outside of it, and a jet black flake paint. All lights were white, but it had a white light on each corner and then a bright one in the center. Now, this is very, very interesting. I don't know whether you're aware of who NIDS are, but NIDS were set up by Robert Bigelow, who was a billionaire who was asked to investigate UAP. And so they weren't any affiliation to the US Air Force or anything like that. They were an independent study group, and probably the best funded study group that there's ever been. And he did a study of, I think it was 167 different sightings of black triangles in the US. And the very, very interesting thing is that the gray dots on there, if you can make those out, are all air mobility command bases. And you'll see that the red dots are where people have had these sightings from 1990 to the present. And it joins the dots, essentially. That becomes even clearer in the second map, which shows air mobility command bases, but also Air Force material command bases. And these would be the flight paths from those. Now, you can see, obviously, in the southwest, you've got Nevada, and that is the test area for doing black projects. And there have been tons of them down there. Now, I'm sure a lot of those were things like the B-2, B-21, all of these pointy triangular drones that we're seeing today. However, again, this is 167 different sightings, and most of them fitting the characteristics that we've discussed earlier, as in they were moving very, very slowly. They were jet black, things like that. So, common descriptors of the black triangle phenomena: either silent or a deep electrical humming sound. And people often describe it as if you have an electrical transformer that you have ever been close to, and you can hear that kind of boo sound. It's similar to that. Also, a great effect on electrical devices. So your phones, your cameras, all that sort of stuff will stop working. Evidence of pulsed microwave energy. This is something that Jacques Vallée has commented on, where people will have sunburn and other microwave damage. So perspex will go milky, things like that. The visual presence of plasma fields, as we've discussed before. But what's interesting and what's different is that normally plasma would be an equal, like an orb. Orbs are big balls of plasma. And it doesn't appear to be like that. It seems like the plasma kind of hugs the outside of the craft itself. So that's a point of difference. They demonstrate extreme acceleration. Often people just say, as if you just shot it out of a gun. There is no gradual acceleration. It's just immediately at an incredibly high speed. Locality to US Air Force bases. Optical invisibility is often described. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people just get the whole hairs on the back of their neck, or they'll say it just vanished. It didn't go somewhere. It just went see-through. Other times they will say, as we heard with the Phoenix Lights and some of the other cases, that it just occludes the stars. And the only way that they could tell it was there, it was because the stars gradually blink out as this thing's moving over them slowly. Other very common things are light points on the edges with a central large bright light. And it seems to be a kind of 3-stage activation process that they go through. So it has different modes, whether these are for hovering and traveling, I've got no idea. I won't speculate on anything I don't know about, but they are observed to, that goes in different stages of brightness, usually before they shoot off. So this is where we're going to get super duper weird. And this is all my theories, and I'm very, very prepared to be wrong about this. But metamaterials, which is often described as a part of the craft, on things like the Ubatuba case, which Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan have discussed, or evidence found at Mount Wilson, there are blobs of cooled liquid metal alloys found, which are found to have and reported to have dropped from UFOs. In one awful case, there was a group of people in a rowboat with a dog, and it dropped on the dog and killed the dog, which is dreadful. But that seems to be the pattern of behaviors, that these things, it like dribbles and drops off craft. Sometimes sources as well. Gary Nolan describes it as very poorly homologized, which means a bad mix. If you melt, 3 different types of cheese, for example, pour it in the same pan and then just put your hand through it, you'll have blobs of some of it kind of mixed together. This is about as scientific as I get talking about cheese. But this is the physical trace that we find. And that's how it looks. It looks like it's condensed. And that's where I'm going to get to. Now, metals like gallium, indium, and iron create very high levels of plasma when they're exposed to microwaves, which is another key clue to the puzzle in my head, at least. In fact, if you mix gallium and indium, there's a video on my B2. I did a documentary called American UFOs, where I'm speculating about the B-21. And if you mix gallium and indium and lightly coat the inside of a beaker and put it inside a microwave, don't ever do this, by the way, like absolutely not condoning this. It creates a plasma storm. You get this enormous amount of purple, silver, and gold plasma. And I think that's key because the relationships between extremely high electromagnetic fields and plasmas, they have different characteristics and capabilities, and they interact with each other. So plasma fields will create a hydromagnetic field of their own. They behave as a fluid, but plasmas can be controlled by a powerful electromagnetic field. So if you can induce over the hull of the craft an extremely strong electromagnetic field, which we can do with our current technology, non-classified technology, you could cause a plasma that you've just created to be controlled and to hug the outside skin of your craft, whatever it may be. And I believe that they're creating the plasma by either having some form of aerosol of the alloys or a very fine spray which comes out of these emitters is then hit with the microwave and whoosh, and then the the waveguides or the electromagnetic field is then feeding that over the craft to completely immerse it in a plasma field. Properties of plasmas: shockwave absorption. So, for example, if your plasma shielded craft goes through the sound barrier, you don't get the buildup and the pressure wave that comes with it because it ionizes the air straight away. You also get, and this was told to me by Dan Isbell, who I've bounced this theory off, friction protection, which I never even thought of. So when, for example, we see the space shuttle come in on re-entry and everything gets super hot and it gets covered in plasma, but it's literally burning and has to be covered in thermal tiles. If you can, either using micropulsed lasers or this theory of a microwave affected alloy, then you can protect the hull of your craft from any air friction. Radar absorption. Because plasmas can absorb photons and other aspects of EMF fields and stuff like that, they can absorb radar and they can absorb photons. And if you can manipulate the plasma, you can manipulate the RCS or the radar cross-section of the vehicle to 0. You can also make it completely absorb any photon that touches it. You can also very speculatively gravitically lens photons around it so that rather than seeing a shadow there, the light would just be bending around it. Just if you imagine pouring water on the outside of a wine glass, how it would just go around, light would do that. So anybody looking at it would just see nothing there. They'd see what's on the other side of it. Just to finish off, it would also be silent. It would create no sonic boom because of that, but also its own engine noises could be absorbed by the plasma itself. So if you were to do a dream tick sheet for the ultimate stealth plane, it would have all of those things on it. And considering we already had craft that could do 2,200 miles an hour in the 60s, these are the kind of barriers that you would need to break in order to have the next generation of stealth aircraft. So, questions that I can't answer are the power systems and the propulsion systems. Obviously, there's miles and miles and miles of discussion out there about 0 point energy. And I think, yes, it's absolutely fascinating, but it's also something that requires a brain much better than mine and a much longer discussion to talk about. Their strategic use as well. If you have a craft which is covered in plasma and an extremely strong magnetic field, you can't go and shoot bullets from it. You can't go and drop bombs with it. Debatably, you can't even get radar or radio off it. So it would just be an extremely cool novelty, frankly. Don't forget, we've been making guns and missiles and rockets and things for a very, very long time now. So in order to change to an entirely new technology tree like what this craft perhaps represents, it's got to have a use. So, in terms of overtaking known methods, it takes a lot to be better than the A10. And the A10 has been in use since the 60s because it just does the job. It's very, very simple, but it is perfect at what it does. It's like the crocodile. It doesn't need to evolve anymore. And so any new technology would have to be exceptionally better than existing technology. Like, for example, the F-22 Raptor is a spectacular air superiority fighter. So any different type of craft would have to be generationally better than that in order to even bother coming out, because the tried and tested stuff. But what I think there's evidence of is that they have diversified their research. So just as you'd got the D-21, the Project Aurora, which were unmanned, you'd also got the X program, partially with NASA and the Air Force, where they were getting faster and faster jets, and looking at things like scramjets and pulse jets for crewed things. Also, with that, another unknown that I don't know about is hazards and faults. Now, even toy plasma balls give off a lot of radiation. So you would imagine that the potential hazards when people that we do hear about in witness accounts get too close to these things, they get sunburn. There's extremely high rates of cancers and other things going wrong with people. So maybe they come with a host of health concerns and hazards. I know that the F-117 was nicknamed Toxic Death because the paint on it was so bad for you that even the guys that were spraying it on were all dying very, very early in life. So with new technologies come new hazards. Now, I want to finish with, this was anonymously reported the same night that Dan Isbell and the Rendlesham Forest case took place. And it matches Dan's description absolutely perfectly. It's not his, because he's told me, because I asked him straight out, I was like, were you this guy? But this was reported to, oh my God, I can't remember her name. This was reported to a very famous UFO investigator anonymously. And the witness described themselves as Smith Jones, which is a old British comedian duo. But he described the crowd. He said he was at a place at oh God, the airbase from Rendlesham. It's gone. He was at an elevated position looking down on the top of the craft. And he said it was 30 to 35 feet wide, 40 to 60 feet long. It had 2 windows at the front, and also had this like glow of plasma. So for Dan to see it, and then he heard about this on TV, and it was when he heard about this through the television that he was like, oh my God, okay, right, brilliant. So somebody else off the base saw it too, because he'd made a point of not being involved in the whole Rendlesham thing. But again, it was described as half moon lights embedded in the bottom of the craft, evenly spaced, and with the lights of different colors moving in and out of those like electrostatic electricity. So, and this was 75 yards, which is between 150 and 225 feet. So this is a very, very close sighting, and rarely being able to look down on the top of it. So there we go. That's basically where I'm at. Is I just like I said at the start, you have to be very careful of descriptive biases, of saying that they're all the same thing. But I think, personally, whatever these are based on, which is potentially exotic, there is a secret form of craft, which certainly the US Air Force have been operating since at least the mid-80s, which behaves in those ways. And if it does, following the bad scientific grasp that I've got, then it would be the ultimate stealth craft. So that's why there's no such thing as the TR3B. And that's all I've got.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is that there isn't one thing, but there may be several projects that were
Yes.
seen in different locations, and they're all referred to as the same thing.
Yes. I think it's a little bit like when people see a vacuum cleaner, they go, it's a Hoover, or whatever. And actually, we're describing a type of craft as a TR3B. Now, obviously, these have the same characteristics, but until we see one and have a proper description of one and the differences between these types of things, somebody that's never seen a motorbike before will call them all the same thing, and that's what I'm getting at. But I think that there's very good evidence for whatever this is being in use. And I also think, to get super speculative, I think that some of the times that they're described as a mile wide, I think is an optical effect of the electromagnetic field. I think it can, perhaps just as much as it can kind of make itself invisible, I think it can convex as well and give people the impression that this thing is absolutely enormous. I may well be wrong. I'm only speculating, but if it can affect light in one direction, it follows that it could perhaps do it in the other. Because otherwise, where would they park these things? So that's where I'm at with it so far. But like I said, I've asked some people that are far more intelligent than me if this is at least a potential avenue, and very surprisingly to me, they've all said, yeah, that all kind of checks out in terms of the relationship between EMF and plasma and the practical applications of it.
Yes.
Were we able to generate that amount of power that it would need? But that's a conversation that we haven't got any evidence for, is the propulsion systems. But Dylan Borland said during his testimony to Congress that the most secret thing about it was its propulsion system and its power system. And that's the one thing that they won't have discussed. Now, I also think, I really do think that they were probably flying this over residential areas just to gauge public reaction, because we are a member of the Five Eyes. So worst thing comes to happen and it crashes, it would still be on Allied land. But you can fly it over a population center, and then if people are all going to report this thing as a UFO, that probably means you can fly it anywhere in the world and it's going to get reported as a UFO as well, as opposed to, that's a SR-71B or something like that. So it's all speculation at this point, but I think that's an easier thing to reach for than it's a particular type of spacecraft which doesn't behave like other UFOs, because they don't. Most UFO sightings, or UAP, don't occur in broad daylight over a city. And that's the point of difference with the black triangles. They're often seen over population centers just cruising along. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Now we
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, boys. I need a new computer, and
We all do.
That's where I'm at. My poor old PC is on editing UFO videos about 15 hours a day, and it's not doing very well. So yeah, this happens every now and then.
This happens.
Okay, so before we move on, I'd like to comment on a couple of things you said. It's really interesting that you mentioned the effect of plasma on radar signature about the RCS.
Mhm.
It's totally true. Plasma acts like a natural stealth system. Well, natural because I'm thinking of like a space shuttle coming back to the
Mhm.
atmosphere, and yes, it would become invisible to radar. Uh, some radars would be capable of detecting the tail of plasma
Mhm.
that is created when a hypersonic object travels through the atmosphere, but not the object itself. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that with some very well funded work, engineers could fix that, because
Mhm.
that's just the kind of thing that guys at Skunkworks will work on. But yes, the radar signature, it's true. The temperatures that plasma blob will reach will be absurd, maybe over 2,000 degrees Celsius, and that
Would
will
it be
change.
possible to do it with a non-thermal plasma? Because you can
I
do
don't
that with piezoelectric. That creates a non-thermal. Now, bear in mind, I'm not a smart man, and
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's
None of us
fact.
are.
But I believe you can, if you do it via piezoelectric or pulsed lasers, then you can create a non-thermal plasma, which is essentially cold or inert.
Maybe you don't have to heat the spacecraft or
Mm.
the aircraft. I'm thinking about the space shuttle again. But the thing is that when you heat, when you apply heat to that air, it will become less and less dense,
Mhm.
more and more, more and more. So drag will decrease, and eventually you'll be able to move easier with lower power than you would require to if you didn't have that plasma around your aircraft. So yes, it would especially in noses and leading edges, the point of contact with the air, really the ram air. Yes, that would be really useful. That application would be really useful when you think about the drag itself from the motion of the aircraft. I'm not sure how it would work on maneuvers if it had to make a turn, or maybe something like a like an air combat maneuver. It
Mm.
wouldn't actually need to, but in terms of engineering, I'm not sure how that would work. um
Well, that they're never seen to have control surfaces on. So this is
yeah.
where we get firmly into gnomes and fairyland. But if this is some sort of electrogravitic craft operating in a bubble, as Lazar describes, or something like that, then maybe that explains it. Because you don't see these things bank. I mean, and often you'll hear about them doing crazy things like standing up on end and stuff like that, like the Colin Saunders, was it? I forget his name. The case from the 90s that I showed you some photos of with the silver plasma. He said that
Hmm.
it started off like this and then literally sat up like that before it moved off. So that implies some form of aerodynamic immunity, or at least some other form of thing keeping it up in the air rather than it being a glider or some sort of normal propulsion. But it's all speculation at this point.
Applying plasma to the leading edge would also help you get I forgot the word in English now. How did I do that? um Lift. So it
Oh.
would help you to get lift, because the layers of air would remain glued to the wing or the surface of the craft, and it would be easier than a conventional aircraft.
Hmm.
Okay, it would also act as a stall prevention mechanism, so you could actually fly in more banked profiles of flight than you would without that plasma. That's also interesting. And of course, the acoustic reduction of the sonic boom. You would. I'm not sure if you wouldn't have a sonic boom, or it would be really, really
Muted, yeah.
attenuated. Yes, it would be highly muted because you don't have that impact of the body of the aircraft
Mhm.
with the cold air,
Mhm.
considering that the plasma would be heated. But yes, you would actually find these things. There are projects for plasma actuators to create plasma in some parts of some experimental aircrafts,
Mhm.
but that's also very, very difficult to create, especially because it uses a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And batteries at this time, and generators and engines and blah blah blah,
Mhm.
they cannot sustain that for too long at the moment.
I interviewed Salvatore Pais, who is the um, electrical scientist, electrical physicist, who published the Navy patents for an anti-gravity machine, and I asked him about the potential for the B-21 having an ionic drive, where it separates the charge above and below the wing, and we had a much more interesting conversation off camera, put it that way. But he couldn't tell me anything officially. But he said piezoelectric is where you need to be looking for these triangles and that sort of stuff. So I don't know what that means, whether they're squashing quartz in the back of it. I don't know, but I know how guitar pickups work, and that's
You
about
are
the limits of
you are
my.
talking to the right person, and I mean Eduardo, not me. But
Yeah. Well, that's it. But he was very excited when I asked him about that. But I think what Dylan Borland talks about, and I'm hoping to get a conversation with him at some point, is he says that they have essentially this 0 point energy is that's the big secret. That's how they generate the extreme amounts of voltage that are needed to create the plasma fields and the electromagnetics and all that. So, that's not my speciality, so I won't speculate too much about it. I just ask people that are cleverer than me what they think and then repeat what they say.
one question about this. I know that the stealth bombers, the stealth planes, they are
Mhm.
black, and this has something to do with this black triangles, the color.
Well, I don't know, but I know about the bombers, and so that paint is it's the material that it's not so much paint as a slop of graphene and all sorts of other things, which are still classified now. And they use that. It's actually, if you imagine like a shark skin, that's the texture of that paint, because anything that's kind of polished and reflective will send all of that radar energy in a direction. So if you've got, say, 3 radars all looking for your super stealthy craft, and it doesn't matter if you're sending radar at it on the nose and then it's sending it all off, something's going to see you. So the way that this paint works is that it diffuses it, so it sends it out in a kind of weak thing, and that's why they say that the F-117 has the RCS of a small bird, and the B-21 has the RCS of, like something this big, whereas in actual fact it's enormous. It's because the paint itself sends all these knobbly bobbly surfaces, send the radar waves out in all directions, but much fainter. So that's why they're black. It absorbs.
And one another question. Actually, I turned on the light because I was looking like Nightcrawler from the X-Men.
If you disappear in a cloud and appear next to me, I'll be very frightened.
And I'm able to do this because I have plasma all over my body. So this so-called black triangle.
That's Gustavo's way to say he's really hot. Okay.
That's my wife. My wife agrees. And the movement of those objects, those black triangles, Tom described them. but sometimes we see them just hovering, right?
Yep.
Uh, Actually, we have now helicopters, we have drones that are capable of doing this, and also some fighter jets, right? They can do this, but not
Mhm.
for a long period of time. But we have accounts of these black triangles hovering for a long time, just like the Phoenix Lights. And how can we explain this this characteristic of this object? We do we have a known technology able to do this? And this is a question. You two are the science guys. I'm just
Yes,
the
we
curious.
do. And I've got that technology here next to me right now. Actually, this is not from the skunk works, but do you see that thing there? The
Yeah.
floaty orb.
Hmm.
Well, that is suspended between two magnetic fields. That's one magnet floating above another one, and
Hmm.
I think that is a lot more to do with the behaviors of these craft. Hopefully, you can still hear me. I think that explains their behaviors a lot more than a hovering, something which is propelling
Yeah.
itself and staying aloft. Because again, we don't hear about flaps or control
Hmm.
surfaces or winglets or anything else moving. They're often silent as well. So there's no rotors, there's no, think how loud a commercial drone is. So I think the secret sauce is something a lot more exotic and a lot more electromagnetic or gravitic in nature.
Okay, but if we keep the conversation in the lines that the TR3Bs or the black triangles, they
Yeah.
are secret projects. They are black
Yes.
projects.
Hmm.
This is still in my opinion, it's much more interesting than just say it's a UFO, it's alien.
Yeah, me too.
The conspiracy continues because I wonder um, if the United States or any other country has this type of object of aircraft for since the 80s or the 70s, or but at least since
Yes.
the 80s. Um, where are they? Why aren't they using it? And it makes me think about uh, almost like a secret science kept
Yes.
away
And
from the people.
I think that's exactly
And
exactly it.
and I understand that if you have a secret project, of course the science of it will be secret. But
Yeah. Now
you
I've
don't
just remembered that
okay, go.
so I actually left some slides out because I made it really late last night. And so there's a really famous sighting from 1990 in Belgium. And
Yeah.
that's the picture that everybody's seen of the big fiery three things in a
Yes.
triangle with the one in the middle. So you would say, cool, if it's American, then why is it there in Belgium? That sighting, 1 hour in both directions, there was an American nuclear storage facility and aircraft base, Air Force Base, which is joint shared with the Belgian Air Force. 1 hour in the other direction is another US Air Force base. So I think when you see that Condign report, the ones that are missing, it says NATO classified. And I think it's a joint NATO project, which I think also explains some of the crash retrieval stuff. I think there's a lot more cooperation than we know. But yeah, I do. So yeah, you can speculate and go all the way back to Thomas Townsend Brown and the Byfield Brown effect, and Operation Whitehaven is something worth looking into. And far more speculatively, Die Glocke, which was recovered German bell. Now, I think that was a proof of concept because they just showed that if you whack a great big voltage through this thing, you could make it go up, but you couldn't steer it. Where Mark McCandlish made more progress in his full story of what he calls the ARV, the Alien Reproduction Vehicle. If you imagine, rather than just one voltage system, electrical system that is switched on or off, if you imagine it like a pizza is sliced, and then if you apply a super high charge on one end and you don't on the other, you get tilt. And then, like Bob Lazar describes with the waveguides, if you fully charge, everything up, and that seems to be this 3-tier, maybe it's like a step-up transformer effect. That's when you get the extreme characteristics. But there seems to be this kind of hover or loiter mode and a very low energy, like Mark Leeper described, this sort of 10 miles an hour treetop silent, and nothing but an electrical hum. So it seems to be that, like a car has sports mode, or a hybrid can go from electric and quiet to switching on a V8, and all of a sudden you're off to the races. That seems to be the behaviors that these things describe, because that would also explain it not literally hovering. It's just floating, but it's a totally separate technology. Now, the implications for what you could do, if you could even if you could just generate that amount of power, then you could do terrible things to the internet and Wi-Fi and electrical systems, and disruption of civilization. So it would make a very tactical weapon, and you could probably also disrupt the global power networks and the infrastructure of that. And I think there's so much money invested in having to plug things into the wall and pay for the electricity that comes out, that all of a sudden, if somebody says, hey, I've got this thing the size of a lunchbox and it'll power a city for free, that's against the interest of a lot of people with a lot of money. So I do think it's a secret science. There's the smoking gun. If you Google this, had I have been a bit more competent, I would have got it ready for you. But Thomas Townsend Brown prepared a letter to the Department of Defense and the Navy called Operation Whitehaven, and my phone's listening has just gone on the AI assistant, and it's writing all this down. So I'll just stop that before I get a visit from the government agencies. So he proposed Operation Whitehaven, and in this letter that he wrote to the Navy and the DoD, it said, basically, I've cracked the science. I need these managers, this many scientists, this much money, and I will make whatever you want float. And he said, a direct quote is, he said, I could take a 30-ton battle tank and you could move it with the palm of your hand. And then it went completely silent, and we never heard from any of that science or the people involved again. So you tell me. But I think what we're seeing is 80 years later, this technology in the real world.
Makes me think about ideas like the ones from Richard Dolan, when he talks about like breakaway civilization.
Well, yeah, in a way.
Let's say we have this kind of technology. We have developed it. We are not ashamed of we are not so worried of hiding it. So we are flying this above big cities.
Yeah, but we're not flying them over the ocean where if it crashes, it's fair salvage. We're flying them over NATO countries or Five Eyes countries.
Yeah, but when I say breakaway civilization, I'm not saying anything like aliens. I'm going full conspiracy here, but I'm talking about a group of people, elite group of people. I don't know, who kept this close to the heart of them.
I think that's
it's not
very
sharing.
believable.
Yeah, and now we have with the path we are going with AI and many other new technologies we are developing.
Mhm.
Soon we will have um, I don't know, but maybe we could live for 200 years with changing parts of the body
Yep.
and working in our genome, but this will be only for people who can afford it.
Yep. Well, if you to bring it to
Maybe
a real world
I don't
example,
know. Maybe there will be a moment when mankind will separate. There will be two kinds of people
well, there
because
already is.
eventually, yeah,
There's still people living on the planet with spears and grass skirts, and then
yeah,
there's us with microphones communicating by video halfway around the planet, and they've got no idea that we're here.
yeah. But we still Homo sapiens.
Yeah,
We still
yeah,
Homo
that's
sapiens.
true.
I don't
Okay,
know
so
if there
another
may be a
example of a hidden
okay.
science then is directed energy weapons.
Mhm.
Now, my friend Dan was an instructor for directed energy weapons, and to not just quote him, Joe McMoneagle, the army intelligence guy who ended up with SRI as the remote viewer, he said
Yes.
that in the 1960s they could shoot a plane down with a laser.
Mhm.
And it's never quite made it out. We've got this next generation of aircraft carriers coming out now, which are all electromagnetic systems. So it's electromagnetic catapults to get the
Mhm.
craft off. It's electromagnetic lifts. And the secret sauce is that if you have the ability to generate that much power, then that's when you can have directed energy weapons to negate drone swarms and stuff like that. If you can just have a shotgun of electromagnetic energy,
Mhm.
you haven't got to have iron domes and all these very expensive things that use very expensive bullets and rockets. You can just go boop, nope.
Yeah.
But as a terrorist weapon, or something used against you, it's incredibly dangerous. And as a psychological weapon, these directed energy weapons can make you feel like you're on fire, and that's a direct quote. So these are things which are against the Geneva Convention, it would appear, and we've had Havana syndrome. So that
Yeah.
sounds like at least Russia, definitely America's got it because they've just used it in Venezuela, and he's boasting about it, calling it the discombobulator, and it's like that's how a child describes a directed energy weapon. But it's in use. It's just been used on national
Yeah.
television. There's people talking about it. And that science has existed for at least 20 to 30 years. And yet, if you ask most people, you don't get day one of the army where they hand you your rifle. They don't give you your plasma cannon or your directed energy gun. But these systems are in place and used in quiet engagements. So
Yeah.
I
What?
think whatever these triangles are, there isn't a real world need for them right now because
Mhm.
we've still got plenty of tanks. And I think perhaps, and this is me being super speculative, if we start talking about this science and using it, somebody's going to steal one, and then Jeff Bezos can go off to some asteroid that's 99% platinum, and the world's economy is completely gone.
Yeah.
So I do think potentially there's a secret space capability. I'm not going to say program because that implies all sorts of things, but we had 5 of the Voyager rocket, 5 of the Saturn V rockets. We had 5 of them ready to go, and 4 just were left to rust. So why? Why wouldn't we use that 10 years later, 15 years later, unless we had a much easier way of getting up and doing this kind of stuff? And I think, to bring it back to a real world example, you've just had Lockheed Skunk Works and NASA showing off about that ridiculous looking thing which can go supersonic without creating a shockwave, but it looks it looks like a knight's lance. It's like a super giant comedy mosquito thing. And I think that is just a way of kind of pretending that we're still researching, going faster and faster, when in reality, we have a technology which can do it effortlessly.
So one of the reasons of this technology is kept secret to this day. Not so secret, but as you said, in the case of Venezuela. But I'm talking about these aircrafts and the technology behind it. It would be much more political and economical motive than
it would
military
disrupt
one.
the systems of power.
Yeah.
I mean, the Department of Energy is probably the scariest group of people on the planet, and they make a lot of money from everybody plugging things into the wall and having to pay. I mean, the UK has the highest energy bills in the world, and this is through privatized electricity, and it's a cold country, so you need to keep the heating on. And for that to be completely flipped, that's just not in anybody's interest other than the poor people that can't afford to research it, so it's just it's almost a bit like we see in global politics, where they say, okay, so we investigated ourselves and we found that we did nothing wrong. And I think that this is what's happening with the Department of Energy and these things that would make free energy for everybody, or free food for everybody, or free healthcare for everybody. It's like, okay, do I want to be a super billionaire, or do I want to go back to being not needed anymore? I'll just keep this quiet. He's gone quiet. He's muted.
I'm sorry. It was them. You're going full conspiracy. Everybody knows you never go full conspiracy. Okay.
Yeah, but if I don't go full conspiracy, I will be quiet the whole episode.
I wasn't going to go fully weird. I thought I'd stayed relatively. I'd kept at least 1 foot on the shore, but then you dragged me out into the deep water, so we had to go there.
Yeah, we did an episode before on the podcast a long time ago in a galaxy far away about the TR3Bs and the reverse engineering program and this all this stuff. And we spent a lot of time talking about this question. So if this exists, why they are not using it, and why they're still, I don't know, testing all this time. So I think this is one question that pops in the head of everybody who's listening to it.
Well, this was. I mean, I kind of touched on this at the end of it, but it's like, well, what do you use it for?
Yeah.
At some point, it's a really expensive executive toy and a proof of concept for a science. But then, we've got the F-35 and the F-22, and they can handle anything in the sky right now. This thing probably can't drop bombs or bullets or stuff like that. So it's kind of, and yet the things it can do are really, really cool, but don't really have a tactical or a financial reward. So I think we keep them secret so that nobody else catches up. And honestly, I don't think they've got too much of a use for it, other than that it's really interesting. And probably, you can't admit that this thing exists until you admit and the power source. And I think that the power source, which is probably what we refer to as 0 point, I think that is why it's secret, because you can't, like Kevin Knuth, for example, he described the Tic Tac, and he said that the power required for, if it was using a conventional propulsion system, would be equivalent to all of the energy in our solar system for a second, just to make it do that atmosphere to sea level jump in like 0.2 of a second or whatever it did. So if we're talking about 100-yard long black triangle that can just go bip, gone, out of sight, then the next question that comes half a breath later is, how are they powering it? And that's the conversation that they don't want to have, I think.
Yes, but I don't know, because this is a totally disruptive technology, right?
Yeah.
And we are seeing disruptive technology right now, with AI, and we
Mm-hmm.
have this before with the internet, and we have this before
Yeah, but I disagree with AI.
yeah, but we have this before with when airplanes came up, and every time we have a disruptive change, a disruptive technology, I'm I'm probably wrong, but I don't know if we, as humanity, as a society, we are used to be this careful. Oh, let's go. Let The world will change so much with if we start using airplanes. So it will
Yeah.
it will destroy the economy of the railroads. You see, so
Well, yeah,
that's
yeah.
one concern I have.
But I think that what we've got now is perfectly fine for doing what we need. And I'm sure, for example, that like a jumbo jet is pretty good. It can fit loads of people on it. If
Maybe
something
it's
goes
too
wrong, it isn't
disruptive.
going to microwave everybody. Yeah, exactly. And if a jumbo jet crashes, you're not giving away any secrets to anybody. Whereas I think if one of these things crashes, the amount of energy on board, imagine if that, I mean, at the end of the day, if you, and I don't want to use too tasteless of an example, but if you take a passenger plane and you hijack it, you can do terrible things. But if you take something which can create all of the energy in the solar system in a heartbeat, you can destroy the entire planet with that. So I think that's probably why they keep the best toys, in the bedroom, and they let everybody else play with the stuff that's already out there and perfectly cheap and easy to replace.
Yes.
I'm sorry. There are three comments I must make. Number one, I forgot to mention. I was talking about plasma at that time.
Mm.
You could use plasma to steer that aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
If you create small, how can I say, if you create small changes in the surface of the aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
in hypersonic flight, for example, you will create shock waves within that bubble of plasma, and
Mm-hmm.
that will allow you to steer that aircraft. I learned that
Cool.
in an academic extension back in 2020 in Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte, which is one of the best aerospace engineering courses in South America. Well,
Awesome.
one of the best engineering courses in South America. But okay. Um, Also, uh, I once I met a witness of the TR3B. It was in Minas Gerais, near Varginha, and
Mm.
he said he saw this weird black triangle flying very, very quickly without any noise, and he saw it for a couple of seconds
Cool.
near the horizon. It just zipped through, but he could see very clearly it was a black triangle. It was like 9 or 10 years ago. And the third thing is that many of the things Tom just talked about are in this book that you may or may not have heard. Gustavo launched it last year, and the Maury Island case in the US, where a UFO dropped hot pieces of metal. He showed some pictures that look like the things that happened. The special aircraft that were developed, and I am looking for them right now. I will find them in
The
a minute.
Horton.
The Horton wings,
Mm-hmm.
the A12s, everything. It's all here, and I just can't find it, even though they're all here. Oh, here. Okay. So, for example, on this page, you will find very nice pictures. So even if you don't like the content of the
Beautiful.
book, the pictures are beautiful. Even if you don't like what Gustavo wrote, okay? It will
See,
If you
that's
don't
the
like
real
even
TR.
even if you don't like Gustavo.
yes, even if you don't like Gustavo or if you're not interested in a topic, at least the
Ooh.
pictures look really nice. Okay, so it's really good for showing to your guests at home, and oh, this is the picture of the Belgian triangle.
There we go.
Okay, so Gustavo, do you have plans to release an English version of your book?
Yes, of course.
I
I
do
don't know
hope
when.
so.
I don't know when, but I do have plans.
I hope so, because it's so important to. So we've talked about this before, but one of the things that I think is the most important thing we can do, because we don't trust the government, we can't trust video anymore because of AI, and I think there is a whole world full of historical data in this field that will help us all put the jigsaw together. And we need to stop involving the government and waiting for them to please tell us how terrible you are and all the awful things that you've done over the years. We need to just do the science ourselves. And step one of that is communication. And that's why I love you guys and what you're doing. And that's why this book needs to be in English, because people need to know about Sioane and Operation Parato and all these amazing things that come from your part of the world, because honestly, it just doesn't get into the bubble when you're in England or even America. Americans tend to only care about cases that happen in America.
Soon this book will be in English. I promise you that.
Awesome.
And when you were talking about the sightings of the black triangles, this connects directly to the book, because I the object of the book, the goal of the book is to talk how ufology, or the UFO myth, was extremely convenient for especially the CIA, but for the government, the armed forces in the USA, and how they denied or validate the topic according to its convenience. So we basically talked about it. So in this conversation here, we talked about, okay, so we can fly this black triangle over a city because everybody's going to say that's a UFO.
Yeah.
All right, let's use this.
Then
Let's
you can get
engage
away
in
with
this.
flying it anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, let's engage in this. Let's encourage people to think about it. And then you have some former, I don't know, there's such a thing, a former counterintelligence agent. You have a former counterintelligence agent coming forward and saying uh, really incredible stuff, and then he will go to a conference and show a extremely ridiculous picture. you know so this you
Yeah. I try and stay
you poison the well.
I try and stay at least neutral about people, apart from Rick Doty. So I have nothing to say about the gentleman in question. I'm sure he's wonderful and very honest.
Yeah, we are in Brazil, and if you want, we can cut this part out of the show.
I think you know me well enough.
Just for your safety.
If you've ever seen Bambi, Thumper's mum says if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how I feel about Lou Elizondo.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Is there anything else you would like to cover before we begin to land this plane? Which is a very nice metaphor for today's episode.
What a great
Because
segue. He's a pro, isn't he? I need to write
Yeah.
that down. Yeah. No, I just want to say thank you very, very much. And I love the way that you guys aren't afraid to do it properly and lean on the data, because I mean, I'm gonna be middle-aged and moan for a minute, but ufology's getting really clickbaity over here, and really kind of everybody wants to read the title and then nobody wants to sit through an hour of why this is probably true or probably not. And I think that after that trend ends, people are going to always come back to depth and research, and that's what you guys do better than anybody, frankly. So thank you very, very much for letting me come out to play, and I just hope you guys go on to greater and greater things.
Thank you, Tom. I think we owe this to you. This episode with you. You have been such an incredible friend to us, and we talk a lot almost every day.
We do.
We become really. I'm every day. I'm trying to convince Tom to move to Brazil, and you said about you talked about now of ufology become you. I hate this name actually, ufology, but this area, this field, becoming more and more saturated with clickbaits, and we actually had a moment in this last month, January, involving the Virginia case, right? In Brazil, especially, it was different. You have no idea how it was here in this last month, because we have James Fox, and we have a big documentary in Rede Globo, and we have Rony Vernet, another UFO researcher, and in the month of Virginia, and everybody was fighting and screaming, and there the community was went crazy about this topic. And at first we decided, okay, let's wait all the documentaries, all the shows, everything, and then we will give our opinion about it. And we just sit and wait. And when we got there, we said, okay, let's not talk about this.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about it anymore. Everybody has said what they wanted to say, and it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter the arguments. Everybody has its own opinion. So
yeah,
what's the point?
I agree. I think from my experience, and yes, I know I sound like a grumpy old man, but most people up here think that disclosure means I want you to tell me that what I believe is correct. And they, good science's dream should be to be humble enough to go, brilliant, we broke it because we've learned, and when science and people's opinions can be humble enough to realize that when they're wrong, they're learning, it's just not happening at the moment. And I think possibly that's on purpose, but things are just getting silly, and everybody's throwing the toys at each other, and nobody wants to say, actually, you were right, that's really interesting, so I don't know. I'm just moaning at this point, but you're absolutely right, man. It's crazy out there. And what people don't realize is that we're a tiny niche of weird people that are interested in this subject. So when we're trying to get people from outside of that tiny niche, sometimes they peep through the windows and they see all the nerds fighting, and they just go, no, I don't want to be in that room. So, this is what we need to stop. We have far more in common with each other than differences. And I think we're only going to get more people interested if we can start acting like good children,
Yeah, Tom, thank you. I know Gustavo already thanked you, but thank you for being with us again. We've been to your channel, you've been to our channel with Jeff, but now we can talk to you, you alone, and I hope
Love
we
it.
get to do that more often. You said,
Anytime.
how much time do you got? I'm kidding. You said that we cannot trust uh, things anymore because of AI. My mother just sent me this,
Oh my
and
god.
she's asking me if this is true.
Oh
It
no.
happens like twice a week now.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's the world we live in today. But anyway, let me just bring everybody here. Okay, I think we can land this plane then, and
Three good
close
looking
our
men.
shop. Where? I'm kidding. We can land the plane, close the shop, and the show, whatever metaphor you choose. Now, seriously, thank you, the viewer, for staying with us until the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you are not from Brazil,
Oh,
because we
we have to. Tom has to talk about his channel. His channel.
yes. I'm just
That's
gonna
okay.
pass it over to him, but please subscribe to our channel because number one, we're gonna make these international interviews in English more often, so you're gonna have more content from us. And speaking of content, better content than the one we do, we have Tom Vernon UAP channel, which belongs to this fine British gentleman here, and he
He's
will
so
talk
smooth.
to you about his channel. Tom, how can people find you on YouTube or whatever else you're creating content?
They can find me. I'm in a few places, and I wouldn't expect everybody to look there, but I'm on the Jeff Nusatelli podcast, who's our friend from the last time. I'm on my own channel more often than not, which is Tom Vernon UAP, where I do things like I've done tonight and just as low professionality. And then I'm sometimes on the UAP Files podcast as well, where I get to speak to people that are amazing. So yeah, you can find me if you want to see deep dives. I talk a lot about consciousness and military planes, and I try and do one and then the other so that the people that are into aviation don't get too freaked out by me talking about telepathy and vice versa. So there we go. Yeah.
And near death experiences.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a very eclectic channel. You get a bit of everything there.
Yeah, and a
Okay.
lot of nothing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
we are start talking about the football championship in Bulgaria now in Ocontato podcast. So talking
Nice.
about eclectic.
Yes,
Definitely.
last episode, Gustavo opened. He opened the episode talking for 10 minutes about the Bulgarian soccer championship.
You don't say
Absolutely out of nowhere.
I think this is how much sense that we make when we go and talk to normal people, though. It's as if we've just gone and rambled about some obscure sport for 10 minutes and their eyes just glaze over. Yeah, that's great.
but
It's
you
good
don't
to
say
know.
soccer to a British.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's football.
That's all good.
Football. Just to make sure that people on the other side of the screen will understand what we're talking about, the kind of sport we're talking about. Anyway, and he talked about it with a lot of property. He actually knew what he was talking about. He made some very smart comments about it, and I have no idea where he got those information from. But anyway, thank you all for joining us and staying with us. Tom, thank you again. I hope we haven't scared you enough already. If you ever come to Brazil, maybe we can have a beer or something and do this,
Maybe
in
we can
person.
have a beer or 10.
One, yeah. Just one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. Yeah, one.
I'm gonna finish this before. I'm gonna finish this before we say something we're gonna regret.
Yeah,
Bye,
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Bye, bye.